Welcome everybody to the Forming the Future podcast series by Michelmersh. Today we're going to be talking about the future of ceramics in construction, and I'm delighted to say that we are joined by Rob Flello, the Chief Executive of Ceramics UK, and also Emily Herbert, Marketing Manager of Michelmersh, and Sarah Gresley, Innovation and Sustainability Director of Michelmersh. We're going to be discussing all sorts of challenges that we're facing within the ceramics industry in the UK, but emphasising the role that ceramics plays to our everyday lives and the important strides that we're taking across the sector to meet those challenges head on. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Rob to introduce himself.
Lovely, thanks Sarah and thanks Emily. I'm looking forward to this. I'm Rob Flello, and I'm the Chief Executive of Ceramics UK.
Thanks, Rob. And also you've got a history of being an MP, haven't you? Was it for
Infamy.
Stoke-on-Trent?
Infamy. Yeah, I was the Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent South for 12 years, 2005 to 2017. And in that time, all sorts of things. I was a shadow justice minister. I was PPS to about 3 or 4 different secretaries of state when we were in government. So, yeah, I got to see the corridors of power and how things are done and not done. Interesting times.
I'm sure we'll come on to a few of those kind of political challenges as we go through the session today. But I thought it'd be quite apt to start with talking about how vital ceramics is to our social and economic development here in the UK. You know, we all know that we provide as a sector innovative products which have economic value, support the net zero obligation with products that offer great longevity and durability, and we create thousands of jobs across the country. So it really does play a part in every single thing that we do, and we've got great influence there. We're a sector as well that's quite dispersed across the country, and so coming with that presents a lot of challenges, but really coming back to playing a part in our everyday role, it really does, doesn't it, Rob?
Wow, you put it beautifully. Yeah, the short answer is we would not recognise modern life without ceramics. Whether it's sitting here in a beautiful brick-built house with clay tiles on the roof and clay pipes running to it. This conversation now wouldn't be possible without the ceramic refractories that enable IT systems. There wouldn't be any glass in my house without refractories making it possible to produce glass. Outside, I've got a car. It's made of steel. Steel wouldn't be possible to produce that without refractories, ceramic refractories. Parts of the engine are ceramics, brakes are ceramics. Everything in our lives are touched by ceramics. And that's without, the smallest room in the house, that's got ceramics in there. The kitchens, ceramic tiles. The mug that I've just finished my coffee and I'm thinking about the next one. I wouldn't be able to drink that. It'd be burning my hand without ceramics. Everything comes back to ceramics. We would be living in caves, eating out of wooden bowls and not being able to watch our streaming services, which are essential to everyday life, really. So none of those things are possible without ceramics. And you make the point about being dispersed. Our members, we've got about 90% of the industry. We'd love to have 100%, but still to persuade a few. But those members are in every corner of the UK. So we've got members in Scotland and in Wales. We've got a member in Northern Ireland. We've got members through every county, pretty much of England. And I think the last count is about 151 sites everywhere, from home counties, Devon, Cornwall, up into the northeast, northwest. You name it, we are there, and we are fundamental to the UK economy. You make the point about the thousands of jobs directly employed in the industry, but without our industry, you're not employing bricklayers, you're not employing roofers, you're not employing in the hospitality industry. We enable the UK economy. And I think in a way that's almost our problem. We're hidden in plain sight, and despite being a critical enabler of the UK economy, we're just too good. People don't notice us because we're always there, we're reliable. And yeah, I'm not suggesting for a moment we stop being reliable, but that's kind of almost, we're too good for our own good.
That would be something that I would say is that for everyday people, you don't realise how much ceramics has to play in your everyday life. there's the clear things like picking up your coffee cup, but the technology and what's involved in that from ceramics is huge. Is that a big part of what you guys do at Ceramics UK, is trying to raise awareness of how much and how important ceramics is in everyday life?
We do, absolutely, and that geographic spread. Because as well, I mean, at the moment there's a lot of talk around defence issues, medical. Without ceramics, you're not having the MRI scanners, the CT scanners, you're not having artificial limbs, you're not having heart pumps. We are absolutely everywhere, and we do constantly bang the drum. We're constantly trying to raise the point that we are essential, we are that critical enabler. And just at the point when we finally think we've educated the latest government minister, lo and behold, they move and we get a new government minister, and we start all over again. And the same with backbench MPs. We spend a long time prior to the last general election getting MPs of all persuasions and peers to understand the industry. We were making some real good strides forward. Of course, general election, huge new number of MPs come in, big challenge again to educate them.
And what are the things that you're having to re-educate on? What are the biggest challenges?
I think the fundamental is the fact that we are hidden in plain sight, that people just don't realise that everything they do, every interaction of an MP, they're sitting in the House of Parliament. That's thankfully a brick-built building. And so, they wouldn't be able to enjoy. They'd be sitting in a field if it wasn't for bricks. They wouldn't be having quite the same experience with whether it's the canteen or whether it's other facilities in that building without ceramics. They wouldn't have the TV screens on the wall telling them what's going on in the different debates without ceramics. So every single aspect of what the MPs do, we're educating them to realise that's only made possible by the ceramics industry. And also then the challenges, and I know we're going to get onto this, but we're also educating them around the fact that on the one hand, yes, it would be nice for government to recognise the fundamental nature of our industry and to do everything they can in a positive way. But it would also be nice for government to stop hurting us and stop doing things that are they might think are neutral or somehow fair, and actually are not, and they do real damage to our industry. And so, for example, on some of the carbon taxes and net zero, we, as an industry, we do embrace net zero. We do embrace being as sustainable and being as clean and as efficient as we can. But at the same time, we're then competing with countries that are still burning coal in coal clamps to make bricks. Or worse still, they're countries that melt down tyres to burn tyre oil to make flower pots, which then get imported into the UK. Or they're countries that we've just recently signed trade deals with where they're burning Russian gas that, quite rightly, our manufacturers can't use. And so there's a real tension between our industry wanting to do the right thing and doing the right thing, and then being faced with imports because government don't see a problem with that, which are just, quite frankly, unfair.
I agree with that, Rob, and we're at risk of decarbonising by deindustrialisation and offshoring all of the carbon by importing products which have higher carbon and fewer standards. So it's real short-term thinking to a long-term problem that we're facing.
I was just going to say it's actually worse than that, because we're not at risk. We are already seeing it, and we have been seeing it for a few decades.
Yep.
That UK industries are shutting down, and we're just importing the product from abroad, and it's a dirtier, higher carbon, less good. We make fantastic products in this country. We make, whether it's on the ceramic side or on the other side, we make amazing products in this country, and we're importing stuff that is not as good and is far higher carbon footprint. And that's not a new problem. That's been happening for a long time. And the risk is, if government don't stop that and do something about it, then we will just have a completely offshored industry. You only have to look at the government's own Committee on Climate Change graphs to see that as the UK's emissions have really fallen off a cliff over the last 40 years, global emissions have gone up. How is that good for the planet?
Yeah, and we've had similar conversations, Rob, with other speakers on over the different podcast series, but talking about also alternative materials and unintended consequences with
Mm.
promoting products as well that have a shorter lifespan. You know, really is that long-term sustainability thinking going on, and that's where there's those gaps. So it's incredibly worrying and challenging for the sector to compete with these alternative materials who, quite frankly, don't compare on the durability and longevity argument, and therefore have a lower carbon over the life expectancy of the built environment.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Sarah, because I think one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realise as well is if they buy, let's take a house. If you buy a house that's made of certain materials that are not brick, they don't have that 150, 200 year sustainable life. They only have a life expectancy of perhaps 50 years, and you buy a house and you don't realise that. And let's say, for the sake of argument, you live in that house and you bring your family up, and 20 years pass, and then you think, I think I'll sell this house. Who's going to get a mortgage on a house that's only got at best a 30-year lifespan? And so I think this is a problem that's being stored up for the future that people are just not sighted on at the moment. And it's certainly one of the things that we are sighted on, and we're going to be starting to do a lot of promotional work. We're reaching out to UK Finance. We want to engage with them so that the mortgage lenders that they represent are aware of this growing problem, and also are able to help make representations. You might be convinced by the argument that over a 50 period of time, a particular material might have a lower carbon footprint, but in 50 years' time, when you're knocking that building down, and the brick built house next door is just sort of sitting there going, it's getting started, what's your problem? There's going to be some major problems in decades to come that at the moment people are not picking up on, and they really need to see that.
It's the very near future, though. We had a guest that was talking about a project that, with intent, was being designed for a 30-year lifespan.
Mm.
I think it's consumers generally are going to be so unaware of the very short time periods their home might be around for. So I think it's a real problem.
And not
Absolutely.
just about the resale value as well. I think, as well, it's an affordability issue to maintain that property. So,
Mm.
if we do start transitioning towards more rendered facades, etc., we're expecting the homeowner to take on that cost of consistently maintaining and remaking that facade, or painting or maintaining it. And that's just something that, again, you wouldn't have if you had a clay brick facade.
Absolutely, and puts me in mind of two things. I think one is, if you are a housing association, for example, you're going to have that maintenance issue for a very long time, where every maybe 15 years you're going to be having to repaint render. Maybe 20, 25 years time, 30 years time perhaps, you're going to have to be replacing that render. That's a very long program of work that you're committing to by buying that house as a housing association. You're going to have to be pretty sure that you're going to have the revenue that's going to enable you to do that constant maintenance. So absolutely an issue for the home buyer. But more commercial landlords are going to be looking at this thinking, wow, this is a real ongoing millstone around the neck. The other thing it puts me in mind of, going back to, I smiled slightly at the thought of my 12 years as an MP, but I remember there was an estate not far from where I'm sitting now, at home here, an estate in Stoke-on-Trent that was built of a particular type of preformed concrete material, and people couldn't get a mortgage. They couldn't sell their houses. The only people they were selling their houses to were actual sort of absentee landlords that sort of saw this as a cheap house to buy, and then they just put tenants in there and take the money and thank you very much. And so the then government spent literally millions of pounds on areas like the estate up the road from here, putting bricks around them, clay bricks around the house, giving it a new lease of life. And so that's government money going in to put right a mistake that was made 30 years earlier, 40 years earlier. Are we going to have that in the future? Are we going to expect future generations of taxpayers to have to put right short-sighted decisions made at the moment. These are real consequences that are coming down the line if government are misled. Perhaps is maybe a little bit strong, but I think that that's the direction of travel, to promote materials that have short lifespan and not something like a clay brick that's going to last you for a very, very long time.
And it's about getting that message out, isn't it, Rob, really? Because I know that Ceramics UK has done an incredible body of work towards a roadmap to act as a vision for the UK ceramics industry's low carbon transition. So we talked about obviously the affordability, the maintenance route there. It's also giving them that message that we're around for the future, that we can achieve these low carbon goals and that we're all setting out for. We're investing incredible amounts of money, aren't we, as a sector, to achieve those
Absolutely.
goals.
Yeah, totally. I mean, over the last decade alone, the industry has spent around 750 million of its own money, not government money, not government support, its own money in decarbonising. And whether that's a particular brick manufacturer. In fact, it's more than a decade ago. There's one that I'm thinking of that have had a big solar panel array for 12, 14 years that's been on their site. Others in more recent years have invested in putting up big solar arrays. But other things, heat reclamation, more efficient ways of operating kilns and drying, bringing machinery that saves on energy. A whole host of things that the industry has done and is continuing to do, and looking at ways of improving the material and composition, and perhaps looking at void spaces in bricks. A whole host of things that the industry is constantly looking at how it can take a product that, to be fair, has been around for, just in terms of bricks alone, has been around for 5,000 years. This is a product that's not going anywhere, but in the sense of it's dependable. But it is really going places in the sense of how the industry is finding ways of making it even more efficient and even lower carbon. But again, just coming back to the early bit of the conversation, I'm aware that I think it's in France, they're looking at ways of saying, well, what's the embodied carbon of a brick? And with that embodied carbon issue, is it fair to say that a brick that is capable of lasting 150, 200 years should be measured against a product that's only capable of lasting for 50 years? And I understand that they're looking at coefficients. So they're saying, well, okay, if you're a product that's going to last 50 years, you've got a coefficient of 1. If you're a product that's going to last 150 years, you've got a coefficient of 0.3. So taking an EPD figure for a brick and then multiplying it by 0.3 and saying that's the real life figure that you should be looking at. And so I think the French have already come up with the solution on some of these things to make it more realistic. But that's again where we are looking to push to say, make this recognise the fact that on the one hand the industry is really driving down its carbon footprint, but actually you've got something that's not going to be around for 30 years, 50 years. Anecdotally, I'm sitting here, my house is just over 100 years old. I've bored many a person over the years with the stories about the drill bits that I blunted trying to put shelves up in this house. This house is going nowhere. It's absolutely solid. It's made of good old Staffordshire blue bricks. I think the builder must have had a job lot. But this is, it's a great house. It's dependable. It's solid. It'll last me out way beyond my lifetime and, lifetime of people to come. And that's what you want. You want something that is going to be around a long time, and therefore that carbon footprint of this house is minimal.
And you also want something that's thermally efficient and resilient as well. As you've mentioned, we've got to work towards climate resilience into the future, haven't we? And it sounds like a very interesting way of looking at the figures that France are doing, and I'd be very keen to understand more of the direction that they're travelling. And it's also important to note that it's quite a misconception to believe that manufacturers are only starting to innovate and think about efficiencies now. We have always been making our production processes more efficient. I think we've had a solar installation for plus 8 years on one of our sites, but that's just the renewable energy part of it. We're hugely focused on data and optimization, because if we can reduce what we use first and foremost, then looking towards the transition to alternative fuels will become a lot easier, and a lot less fuel that you'll have to transition with, so a lot less emissions in the long run. And just because we've had crises in the last 5 years that have meant energy prices have quadrupled, if not even more, has it brought even more to the fore the need as well as a sector to reduce our consumption on high energy and hard to abate areas, really. So I think one of the main challenges that should be known by government is that there's not one solution that fits all within our sector. We are investigating hydrogen, electrification, heat recovery, dematerialization, lots of different technologies, including biofuels and alternatives that we can transition to. In my experience, it takes several of these at just one site alone to achieve our goals of reaching net zero, and that's a huge amount of investment and time, which we are all undertaking over the sector, all manufacturers. And so that's where really we could do with a bit more support to reach our goals. But we are indeed making strides as it is. I mean, Michelmersh produced the world's first hydrogen bricks on an industrial site using green hydrogen back 3 years ago now, and that was just the starting point of some of the great work that Ceramics UK are doing with IFS funding as well, to really showcase the varying types of products and how that can be delivered using hydrogen too. So there are really fantastic strides happening within the sector that we should highlight, that we are collaborating and we are investing in the right places, but we do need that extra support.
Yeah, absolutely, Sari. I think, well, there's a few things that come out of that. I think, firstly, take the gift and tableware sector. In Stoke-on-Trent, for example, there are a lot of pot banks, as we call them. There are a lot of old kilns, the bottle kilns, bottle ovens. That was technology from the Victorian era, before the Victorian era, where it started off burning coal. The kiln design changed even during the time that coal was being burnt, and then they decided to use a newer, cleaner fuel, gas. And so, the industry can point back to 200 years more in terms of how it's evolved its kiln design, how it's evolved its use of different fuels. And so, really, we're probably the exemplars of how industry can take a concept and improve it and improve it and improve it, and then make step changes. And that's what we're doing at the moment. You're absolutely right in terms of alternative fuels. But the issue there, which I'm seeing across the whole of the ceramic sector, from the advanced through to tableware and everything in between, every sort of letter in between there is for some members, it'll be that electrification is the way forward. They can move to an electric kiln. Well, at least they could, if they could get good grid connection. At least they could, if the price of electricity wasn't the most expensive in the world. That's quite artificially so as well, because of all the levies and all the taxes that government put onto electricity. Some members just can't. They won't be able to move to pure electric firing. They might be able to use electricity in some of their processes that perhaps are not at the moment. But for a lot of them, it's going to have to be gas of some type, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's biogas. And again, there's whole issues around, if it's hydrogen, where's the green hydrogen going to come from? How is it going to be made? How is it going to get shipped to the member sites? Because I know government have looked at and are actively pursuing hubs, but most of our members are not in those hubs. In fact, I'm struggling to think of more than maybe one member out of the 90 plus that is in one of those hubs. So how's it going to get around the country? What price is it going to be? Because if it's the sort of price it is at the moment, and again it comes back to that earlier conversation around the risk is that if governments say, well, you're going to have to burn green hydrogen, you've got to, at your cost, pay for all the adaptations to your kiln that will be required, and all the additional safety measures and all the rest of it. and there's an issue I'll come back to in a second on that as well. But governments say, right, oh, and by the way, we've no idea how you're going to get it to your site. You might have to tanker it in, and you're probably going to have 8 deliveries a day because you're running a continuous operation on your kiln, and hydrogen is less energy intensive than natural gas, so you're going to have all these deliveries, and by the way, the hydrogen is going to cost you 4 times as much as gas does at the moment. What's going to happen? Most UK manufacturers are going to say, well, that's really kind of you, but we'll go to a country that allows us to use Russian gas, and we'll carry on doing it and just import. So there are a lot of problems with the approach that the government are taking at the moment. And again, this is where we're sort of lobbying government to say, you want us to do these things, we see the benefit of doing these things, but we can't make it happen without government support, whether it's electrification, whether it's the grid, whether it's putting the energy into the grid to allow the offtake. Or whether it's availability of hydrogen. And just on that hydrogen point, I wanted to come on a slight tangent. If you're wanting to fire with hydrogen, as we've learned from the hydrogen project that we're just coming to an end of, a 2-year, £6 million project, we're just coming to the end of that. And some of the learning we've taken from that is, if you're a factory alongside a motorway, if you're a factory alongside a canal, the real issues about what happens if there's a hydrogen leak. I mean, obviously everything will be done within a factory to make sure that any leaks are either not happening or minimise any risk. But what happens if there is a problem, if something goes wrong? Are you going to be phoning up the highways agency and say, could you just close a major arterial route? You can imagine the conversation. Oh, well, when would you like to do that? Oh, now. This is the nonsense. High-speed railway line alongside a factory. A lot of our members are understandably, for good historic reasons, in places that are next to major transport routes. And major transport route and hydrogen use do not necessarily go hand in hand.
No, and that's why for us as a manufacturer, we are not investigating routes that mean that we would have to trailer in and store hydrogen. We're only investigating alternative routes to that because it's just not sustainable into the long-term future, nor is it safe or right to put even more pressure on the transport system for energy transport. So it doesn't make sense from a wide set of views. And so it then limits the opportunities. But there are some alternative ways that we are looking at bringing hydrogen to our site sooner, and hopefully in the coming years we'll be able to be successful at doing some of those projects. But again, first and foremost, whilst some of those challenges really aren't ironed out, we will be focusing on that data and optimization and bringing down the gas use per tonne of product across our sites as much as we possibly can, because that's where we can really make change really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, it's a really positive thing for the business as well as for climate. And I think this is where the leaps forward on AI and IT systems that will take sensor data and maximise systems in real time, it will make a massive difference to the industry. It's that next step change. But just going back to your point about not tankering in hydrogen, absolutely. But then I'm aware of businesses that wanted to put storage on a green field away from housing next to their factory, and the local authority turned down the planning permission. This is sort of nothing is joined up within government and either national or local level and properly thought through. We stand ready. We have many times conversations with government to share expertise, share understanding, experiences, but we need government to take that proactive step of bringing all these threads together and understanding what is going to be feasible, what is not going to be feasible, and therefore what alternatives need to be looked at.
And there needs to be that. Sorry, Emily. There needs to be that speed to help with electrification routes as well, because, like you said, there are use cases where we can utilise electricity more. We all know that we dry our products between 100 to 120 degrees, and we fire between 1,000 to 1,200 degrees. So there is a feasible transition towards electrifying options for the drying of clay products and ceramics products across the sector. But we're facing challenges like you highlighted before about that electricity grid connection and expanding and being able to get the right communication with the DNO and getting that expansion to also be commercially feasible as well and not a hindrance to that adaptation or transformation for the business.
Yeah, and if you want to produce hydrogen on site, so for example, if rather than tankering in, you wanted to electrolysis or whatever it might be to actually produce hydrogen on site, you're going to need a source of electricity. And if the grid connection isn't there to be able to do that, again, you're just stymied at every turn.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that we've talked about a lot with some of our other guests as well is recycling and reusing as an alternative. But again, one of the issues being the commercial viability of scaling that up so that there can be enough product available for people to use at the right cost. Is that something that you guys are talking about as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we explore every avenue. I guess one of the issues with recycling is depending on how you look at it. I mean, knocking down an old house, an old building, and reusing the brick, and that happens. You know, there's quite a market for reused brick. In fact, such a good market. I'm aware of people importing Indian bricks and making them look as though they're recycled ones. So. There's an issue there as well, which perhaps we might come back to, but I'll park for now. But in terms of recycling, well, there's so many really good examples of former factory sites where the former factory site is no longer a factory or an office block that's no longer an office. And in fact, you only have to walk around London and see lots of examples of former office blocks that are now accommodation blocks. And so in terms of recycling, brick is probably the ultimate recycling material because either the building itself is repurposed, brilliant piece of recycling, or in the occasional case of a building being knocked down, the bricks can be cleaned up and reused, or ultimately, perhaps if the bricks really can't be reused for whatever reason, well, you have an inert material for all sorts of uses, whether it's road construction or whatever it might be. So it's a perfect recyclable material. Recycle the building, recycle the bricks, or use the inert material. What's better than that?
Bricks have a fantastic reuse and recycling argument, don't they? And they always have done, and that's why we have buildings that have lasted hundreds of years and gone through
Yeah.
multiple generations of families and still live on today. Rob, if I may, if we could talk a little bit about coming back to the sector and the economic value that ceramics gives to the UK. And is it something like 17,500 people we directly employ?
I think it's more than that. I think it's around 22,000. It's quite hard to pin down an exact number. Again, going back to the point that we represent about 90% of the industry, so we're never quite sure how many people are in that other 10% we can extrapolate. And also some businesses, when people have left, they've moved into more automation. So it's tricky to nail down exactly how many are employed, but it's of that sort of number, give or take 5,000. It's about 20,000 people directly. But as I sort of commented earlier, it's the added value, all the bricklayers that are in work because there's a brick industry, the people in IT, the people producing fantastic podcasts. Those jobs are dependent on the ceramics industry because without a ceramics industry, there's no IT to do brilliant podcasts. So you scale it up, millions of people are only able to do their job. Tens of millions are only able to do their job because of ceramics.
It really is far reaching, and that's where I suppose it's to try and really highlight the magnitude of what the ceramics industry brings to the UK, given the fact that we see a lot of press, a lot of publicity about the steel manufacturing sector or other materials across the UK where they're consolidated. We did speak before about that dispersed nature of ceramics across the UK and the 150 plus sites that you mentioned you have within your membership. But that's in case the point, the issue that we're facing, isn't it? That actually there is no one consolidated investment point for the government to support. It is a far-reaching sector which has fantastic employment, like we've just said. Therefore, huge unintended consequences should we not get support into the next decade and the future, really.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that we highlight to government, really simple, discrete things that the government can do that will make a really positive difference to the industry. So when government, the current government, for example, step in and talk about buying parts to keep Jaguar Land Rover going, or they talk about stepping in and supporting the steel industry, both of which employ far fewer people than the ceramic industry. They see those as somehow more important than an industry that literally underpins both of those industries and more. But the sort of things that we've put to government are things like having a fund that it can be a type of mortgage, a loan to manufacturers. So, the money can eventually come back into government that will allow companies to move to new technology, to buy a more efficient kiln, switch perhaps from gas to electricity where that's feasible. And so that's one thing. There's something called the Supercharger Scheme, which is a government scheme to give relief for electricity, all the tariffs that get added on to electricity. And bear in mind, something like 60% of a company's energy bills are government tariffs and levies. So it's big numbers. But most of the UK ceramic industry does not qualify for that supercharger scheme because of the way the government have developed the scheme. And we've made it very clear to government that they don't have to bring in a new Act of Parliament. They can do it within secondary legislation, which they have the power to do pretty quickly. And I mean, by pretty quickly, I'm talking months, to widen the scheme, to allow ceramics industry to get that massive amount of relief. And yet, that's really difficult, apparently, but stepping in and buying car parts isn't. There is a real tension and a real problem here. But switching it the other way around, those are the things we'd like government to do that will actively help and support the industry. On the other side of it, there are some things that we'd actively like the government not to do, like some of the stuff around business rates. If they want to get the big warehouse companies, there are others available, but Amazon is the one that springs to mind. They want to get them paying more business rates. So rather than addressing that, they're just on about putting business rates up for people that have large buildings out of town. Well, that would be things like brickworks and clay roof tile works. So they're on about increasing the business rates, massively increasing for manufacturing. They're talking about landfill tax, and again, hugely uprating landfill tax. Well, as I said a moment ago, at the ultimate end of its life, smashed up bricks is completely inert. So why should the landfill tax on a completely inert, safe product be the same as chemical waste or medical waste or something of those nature? It's going to completely backfire. It won't give the government the money that they think it will generate, because it just won't happen. People just won't pay those sort of rates. And at the same time, it will cause great harm to our industry. And there's a long list of these harms that government either have already brought in or proposing to bring in. And so one of our roles is very much to highlight these harms, not just to government, but to backbench MPs whose constituents depend on our businesses for their livelihood, and try and get them to see the error of their ways. But the direction of travel, if they don't, is we get that deindustrialisation.
And clearly a huge message, varied messages that need to get out. And the more voices, the louder it's heard and the clearer the message. So how, as ceramics manufacturers and also people that are just passionate about spreading the word, how can we help your task and your action that you're taking at the moment?
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, really valuably, actually, can contribute fantastically. I mean, you already do. Our members are brilliant, and our brickmaker members are equally brilliant in terms of getting involved in our promotional work and supporting that. But I think where we'll be looking in the coming months for additional help and support, both in terms of directly engaging even more than you already do with members of parliament, so the constituency. So if you've got whether it's a quarry in a particular constituency or a brickmaking factory, or for our other members, their factories, when inevitably invite the local member of parliament in, and hopefully they accept the invite. It doesn't always quite happen as smoothly as it should, but when they do come in, showing the impact of the government's measures, what it actually means and will mean for their constituents, that's really incredibly important. But there's another piece of work that is some way off at the moment in terms of what's planned, is to actually make a portal whereby employees can go on and effectively fire an email, add a few details in and fire an email off to their member of parliament to say what your government is doing, or what the government, if you're an opposition MP, is doing, is putting my job on the line. Please stop doing it. Or please, if there's a positive, please do this positive. So that's very early stages of planning on that, but that is something that we were looking to bring in.
There's a huge amount of issues, isn't there, Rob? And we, I think, only about a week or so ago hosted an MP on one of our sites talking about the UK emissions trading scheme and the impact on UK house building, etc. So there is just a wide variety of challenges that we're facing as a sector, and I couldn't agree more. It's about having more of those conversations and communicating those challenges, but also what we're doing as a sector to proactively adapt and transition towards net zero, and some of the still provide a great economic value to this country, and a fantastic product on top of that. It's been an absolute pleasure, Rob, to talk to you today, and Emily Herbert, the marketing manager of Michelmersh, Sarah Gresley, Innovation Sustainability Director of Michelmersh, but indeed Rob Flello, the Chief Executive of Ceramics UK. We've talked about lots of different issues facing the future of ceramics in the construction industry, and indeed the opportunities that we've been taking head on as well. And thank you for joining us for the Forming the Future series of the Michelmersh podcast, and have a great day.
Sarah, Emily, thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. I can't believe the time has flown by. I'm just going to do an unashamed plug that I think one of the perfect ways that we can demonstrate the value of the brick industry is, of course, the upcoming Brick Awards, and every year's Brick Awards, where we showcase just how amazing this industry is, and certainly the brick sector. And at that event are movers and shakers, architects, developers, specifiers. I'm going to miss somebody out, aren't I? But all the people that make industry out there see the value of it, and it's a great showcase. But thank you for this opportunity, Sarah, Emily. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope that people watching, listening, get value from it, and come back to us if you've got any questions. So thank you both very much indeed.